the 37-year-old man killed by federal agents today. He should be alive. And Renee Good should be alive in Minneapolis today. They both should be with their families right now. I'm absolutely horrified that mass agents are shooting and killing innocent people on the streets of Minneapolis. Witnesses have described this as an execution on the streets of Minneapolis. This is a classic example of excessive use of force. This is a classic example of reckless abuse of power. This is a classic example of how ICE and other federal agencies are hurting our communities. And it's yet another example of how our country is descending into authoritarianism day by day. We're not talking about rogue agents. This is about an all-out assault on American life. This is about the Fourth Amendment. This is about due process. This is about the United States Constitution. That is what is now being jeopardized by Donald Trump, Stephen Miller, Kristi Noem, and all of these other agents of an authoritarian president every single day. Mass federal agents kill an innocent person, and then this administration fabricates lies about the individual. This is gaslighting on steroids. It is disgusting. It is un-American. Trump and Vance and Kristi Noem are at the head of a rotten agency that has become a criminal organization. These federal agents have become the criminals who they are supposed to be arresting. That is what is unfolding right now in our country. Federal agents are killing civilians with impunity, entering homes without judicial warrants, detaining witnesses, and arresting 5-year-olds. They are violating the Fourth Amendment and the United States Constitution, all at the direction of Donald Trump. A memo that comes from a lawyer at the Department of Homeland Security does not override the United States Constitution. It does not give you the right to be able to engage in activities on the streets of our country that are in complete and total violation of those protections which the American people fought for beginning 250 years ago right here in Massachusetts. The American people are outraged by what it is that they have witnessed. The Trump administration lacks humanity, honesty, and respect for the American people. In the case of Renee Good's murder, administration officials blocked Minnesota officials from accessing the evidence. And right now, the Trump administration is once again trying to block the Minnesota police officials from gaining access to the witnesses and to the evidence. This is nothing more than a cover-up. The Trump administration is engaging in a systematic cover-up of what these federal agents are doing in Minnesota, and it will set us a precedent for the rest of our country unless we rise up as a nation to resist this usurpation of constitutional protections. We need to demand answers. We need to demand an impartial investigation of what happened. We need to demand accountability and justice for Alex and for Renee and all of the other victims who have had their rights violated and their lives tragically taken by the reckless and inhumane actions of the Trump administration. When masked federal agents can shoot and kill anyone with impunity, we have crossed a very dangerous threshold in our country. They have become the criminals who they are supposed to be apprehended. That is why we must end qualified immunity, which shields law enforcement officers from liability for wrongdoing. In 2020, I introduced a bill to do that in response to the murder of George Floyd. Now, just 5 years after that murder, Renee Good was killed just blocks away from where that took place. And now Alex Credit has been murdered close by. I recently reintroduced that legislation with Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley to abolish the qualified immunity that shields federal law enforcement officials from accountability and give the victims the ability and the power to sue so that they get their day in court. We must demand accountability. We must ensure that Donald Trump and Stephen Miller and Kristi Noem and Tom Holland are not allowed to run amok in our country as vigilantes, imposing their brand of justice, separate from the brand that we created in the United States Constitution that guarantees equal justice for all. ICE must immediately withdraw from Minneapolis, and we must stop the funding of the Department of Homeland Security. Next week, I am voting no on the Department of Homeland Security budget. I vote no to give them any more money that allows them to engage in these kinds of reckless, unconstitutional actions that are killing people on the streets of Minneapolis, and as the days and weeks go by, followed by deaths of others in cities all across our country. And I'm not going to rest until justice is done for these families and that the United States Constitution is put back in place as the rule of law for our nation. So I'm joined here today by the law enforcement official for Middlesex County. She is the district attorney for the largest population in the state of Massachusetts. And I give you District Attorney Marianne.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon. I echo the sympathies and the condolences to Mr. Credit's family. And we must peacefully and calmly protest what happened there this morning. But now we enter a different phase. Now we enter the phase where there's an assessment as to what happened, an investigation as to what happened. Having overseen many of those investigations as the district attorney, there are several things that need to happen. First, they need to be conducted by local officials. A bedrock of American government is that local officials who are accountable to the local voters should run those investigations. There should be what we have heard so far today, which is that the local authorities are being blocked from the scene, being prohibited from taking evidence. There has to be a slow, methodical investigation as to what happened, conducted by those trained individuals that are local. Secondly, again, critically important, is that there not be a rush to judgment. People have to see an investigation not only as fair, but as perceived to be fair. That does not happen when literally moments after an incident, someone is deciding who is right and who is wrong. That cannot be tolerated. And thirdly, we have to realize that another bedrock is precedent. And if we allow the incident that occurred with Ms. Good to become the hallmark of what is going to happen with this incident involving Mr. Freddy, we are blessing this kind of investigation. We cannot have a federal investigation that is result-driven. True investigations follow the facts and the evidence to the conclusion, not the other way around. And in order for us to win in this battle. We should make no mistake. We should be peaceful, but this is a battle for the rule of law in this country. And we cannot allow the precedent to become the kind of investigation that is a mark of authoritarian regimes and is completely inconsistent with the American way of government. Thank you.
Questions?
Senator, you mentioned you wanted to have an independent investigation into this. Given that, what would that look like in your mind to satisfy that request? My understanding is the DHS is the one who is going to be investigating this right now.
Right. The Trump administration has already concluded that nothing has been done wrong in Minneapolis by ICE agents or CPD agents. It is obvious that something wrong occurred. So there cannot be an investigation which is credible, which is conducted by the Trump administration. So an independent body must be created in order to give the public the confidence that all of the facts are out on the table. Everything that occurred, every shred of evidence is made public. And only then will we have an ability to judge what happened. But Trump is covering up. Trump is already exonerating all of his agency officials from any responsibility whatsoever. And that is a disservice to the tens of millions, hundreds of millions of Americans who have watched this incident already with their own eyes on the video that is made public. So we need to absolutely have an independent investigation, and Trump's administration cannot do it.
Question for the district attorney. You mentioned local law enforcement that is investigating this. It appears in Minnesota that local police, as has been the policy, had made a point to not cooperate with ICE in any way during their operations. Given that, how is it that they can now call for being involved in the investigation of an incident when they've made a point to not work with ICE at all at any point leading up to this?
Clearly, the operations that ICE has conducted are not intended to include a shooting death. And as is the case in Massachusetts, the law is clear that when a death occurs within a particular county, the responsibility for the investigation of that death rests with the district attorney. And in this case, in this county in Middlesex, as the senator mentioned, we ensure that independence by having police in the district attorney's office gather and evaluate the evidence, put that case together. We then employ an inquest model where we present all of that evidence before a judge. The family of the person who has died and their attorney is allowed to be present. The officers and his or her attorney is also allowed to be present. When that is completed, a judge, not a federal agent, not anyone associated with the police, but an independent judge, makes a determination as to whether there was criminal conduct and issues a public report. That is how you can have people see what happened, know that the process was fair, and that the result that was reached was done independently.
To both of you, I'm sure you've seen the video. I just wonder what your thoughts are when you saw it.
This looks like a classic case of excessive force being used, and it's clear that whether it's Renee Good or Mr. Petty, that two deaths have occurred where they should have been avoided. And I think this evidence is as clear as the video which all of the American people are seeing right now. And that's why Trump and his administration have moved in to orchestrate and cover up. Because in the law, there's a concept called res ipsa loquitur. The thing speaks for itself. The videos in both of these cases speak for themselves. And the American people are hearing it, and they are demanding justice because they can see that two people have been killed without justice.
Pose the same question to you from a prosecutor's perspective.
Video is a part of any investigation. You certainly look at that, you're going to be slowing that video down, taking it apart frame by frame, looking for other video. What I hope people take a moment to reflect on from that video is, regardless of how the investigation comes out, just the trauma to the people who were there, of someone being killed with multiple gunshots on a street in the middle of the morning. I think that we are captured there when we talk about what the trauma that people endure from these events. I think the video speaks to that as well. And I hope when we think about whether we're content to allow this to continue, people are factoring in everybody else who's impacted by what happened there today.
DHS has said that the person who was shot and killed was armed. Does that in any way change your calculus as to how you view it, if that was in fact the case, that the person that was shot and killed was armed?
First of all, there's the question of whether that is true. And second of all, just being armed doesn't necessarily give anyone the right to engage in self-defense. The law is very clear as to what this is about. And we do not know enough at this point to know whether there was any right to use self-defense, and if there was a right to use it, it is only to the extent that is required by the facts at that moment. And we just don't know that.
The Minnesota law allows for ownership of and carrying of weapons. So the very fact that that's the answer does not reach the facts which the district attorney says have to be there. Just owning a gun and carrying it is not illegal. Much more than that. It's murder.